The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says more than 28,000 Palestinians are now believed to have been killed since the war began, and 67,000 others injured. Israeli airstrikes reportedly killed 44 Palestinians in Gaza's southern city of Rafah this morning, just hours after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered troops to evacuate civilians ahead of a ground invasion. Well, I'm joined now from Tel Aviv by the Israeli government spokesperson Eylon Levy. Good to see you this evening. Thank you for your time. Perhaps you can just tell us what the plan is when it comes to Rafah.
Well, since the October 7 massacre and Israel's offensive against Hamas, we've seen most of Hamas's army collapsing. Hamas started this war with 24 battalions. We've shattered 18 of them, 2 are left in Khan Yunis, and there are 4 remaining in Rafah. And the plan is to continue dismantling the whole of Hamas's military machine so it can never perpetrate a massacre like it did on October 7th. Now, we are, of course, acutely aware of the humanitarian problems in the Gaza Strip and the fact that Hamas is determined to use civilians as human shields. That's why it's built all of its tunnel infrastructure underneath homes and schools and hospitals. And that's why, in order to keep civilians protected, the Prime Minister has ordered the army to come up with a plan to help civilians evacuate from Rafah so that we can target the Hamas military assets with the minimum harm to civilians. We want them to get out of harm's way so we can go after Hamas.
OK, so what is the plan to evacuate those civilians? Because you told many people to leave the north of the Gaza Strip and move south to shelter in places like Rafah. You're now telling them to leave Rafah. Where are they going to go? What's the plan there?
You're right, that's an astute observation. Before Israel began the ground offensive in the northern Gaza Strip, we gave several weeks' warning for civilians to be able to evacuate. We surrendered the element of surprise there so that civilians could get to safety and we could go after Hamas. But we've been clear from day one with the October 7 massacre that Hamas terrorists will not be immune anywhere in the Gaza Strip, and that's how we've already killed or either seriously wounded or apprehended over half of Hamas's fighting force. The army will now have to present to the government a plan to try to evacuate civilians, and we very much hope that UN agencies that until now have been resisting our attempts to try to get civilians to safety. In fact, outrageously, they've been condemning that as forced displacement instead of cooperating with our attempts to evacuate civilians out of harm's way. We hope that they will cooperate. They have a choice now.
So there's about 1 million people, it's been estimated, who are sheltering in Rafah now. How long are you going to give them to leave? And where are they going to go? You still haven't explained where they're going to go, given that much of Gaza now is flattened.
And that is part of the plan, that the Israeli army will have to present the Prime Minister, because we take our obligations under international law to keep civilians protected very seriously. And it's very important. But do you not have an
idea of where they're going to go? I'm still waiting to hear where in Gaza they're going to go.
Well, there are open spaces in Gaza. There are places where it is possible to set up tent encampments so that civilians can get out of harm's way and not allow Hamas to use them as human shields. And we very much hope that the UN agencies that have until now been resisting our attempts to help civilians get to safety, have instead been urging them to stay in Hamas strongholds, will make the right decision and will help us get civilians to safety instead of trying to keep them in places where the terrorist army that perpetrated the October 7 massacre and is currently holding 136 hostages are trying to use them as human shields.
And will you help them with shelter? You talk about open areas where they can put up shelters. Will you help them with those shelters? Will you help them with the food? Because we're hearing today that people are grinding animal food into flour in order to stay alive.
Absolutely. We've not only placed no restrictions on the entry of food, water, medicine and shelter equipment into the Gaza Strip. In fact, we have excess capacity at the Israeli crossings, which can now handle twice as much humanitarian aid if the world wants to send it. We've worked closely with foreign nations on setting up field hospitals in the Gaza Strip. The Emiratis, the Jordanians have done that, and any other nations that want to send shelter equipment or help to set up field hospitals to look after civilians and get them out of the way while Hamas is trying to use them as human shields are more than welcome to do so, and we will facilitate their delivery into the Gaza Strip.
Time isn't on your side, though, is it? On Channel 12 in Israel last night, the Prime Minister, it was reported, believes he only has a month to complete operations in Rafah because of international pressure, that he needs to do it before the start of Ramadan. Is that correct, that you want to get these operations underway and completed in less than 4 weeks?
Well, clearly we would like to be able to wrap up the war as quickly as possible. We have reservists who are our friends and family, have been ripped away from their ordinary lives, and we want to see them back home. But there is a trade-off between being swift and being thorough. And in order to be thorough, it will take time, because we want civilians to get out of harm's way. We don't want to come in all guns a-blazing, because we understand how catastrophic that would be. And that is why we are being rigorous and being thorough in dismantling Hamas's terrorist infrastructure. And of course, we very much hope that we can get the hostages home. The hostages, we fear, are being tortured and starved and raped and executed in the Hamas terror dungeons, and destroy the final 4 Hamas battalions so that the Gaza Strip can never again be used as a base for attacks against us, not as it was on October 7th, and not as it was for the wars of rocket fire.
Understood, understood. What do you make of President Biden's comments? He said there are a lot of innocent people who are starving, a lot of innocent people who are in trouble and dying. It's got to stop, he said. I'm of the view the conduct of the response in Gaza has been over the top.
I'm not the president's spokesman, but it appears to me that he's being quoted out of context there. He was responding to a question about the hostage negotiations, and that would appear to be consistent with what Secretary Blinken said, that Hamas's response to those negotiations contains some clear non-starters. The United States urged us at the beginning of this war, when Hamas launched the October 7 massacre. It said if that had happened to the United States, its response would be swift, decisive and overwhelming. And the United States still sees eye to eye with us with the need that this war should end with the destruction of Hamas, so it cannot perpetrate another October 7 massacre, as it has been promising to do again and again. And as for the question of hunger, which you just mentioned, this is very important. We want to see more humanitarian aid enter the Gaza Strip. At the moment, there are 15 operational bakeries in the Gaza Strip that are producing 2 million loaves of bread, pita and rolls every single day. And any more aid that the international community wants to send into the Gaza Strip, we have capacity at our crossings to more than double that. And we welcome more aid shipments. It's important to make sure that it, however, that it reaches the civilians.
You're saying that the reason people aren't getting the aid, the reason people aren't getting the food that they need, isn't because you're holding it up at the border, it's because it's not being delivered to the border by the international community.
Well, the problem really is that once the aid is going through the Israeli border, there's a backlog on the Gazan side. So that's why the United Nations is asking us at the moment to keep Kerem Shalom closed on our side on Saturdays, because there's a backlog. We have a problem that the UN agency on the ground, UNRWA, is not able to distribute the aid as quickly as Israel is facilitating it. And worse than that, Jonathan, it's covering up the fact that Hamas is hijacking that aid. Our intelligence estimates that up to 60% of the aid that is entering the Gaza Strip is being hijacked by Hamas.
Where's that figure coming from? Where's that figure coming from?
Those are our intelligence estimates, and you, I hope, have already seen the widely circulating footage of Hamas gunmen on top of aid trucks inside the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, the agency that is responsible for distributing aid is riddled with Hamas terrorists itself. And that's why we are urging the international community, for the sake of civilians in Gaza, to use the agencies that already have experience doing disaster relief in conflict zones. There's the World Food Programme, UNICEF. The World Food Programme, by the way, did an aid delivery to northern Gaza just 3 days ago. Instead of relying on UNRWA, which has been in cahoots with Hamas. It is simply an ineffective aid distribution mechanism. Okay. And people in Gaza are suffering because of the monopoly that this agency has been given on aid distribution.
OK, we're out of time, but we appreciate your time as always. Thank you, Eylon Levy, Israeli government spokesman. Thank you.